And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome from around the globe. This is Robert Leake, Director of Marketing here at eFolder Axient, and happy to welcome you to this Friday edition of MSP Ignition, The Power of Questions. This is our second webinar this month, focused, here we are focusing on the sales enablement side. To all those who are joining, we do this in two different fashions every month, one side on the MSP best practices, and then episodes like today where we focus on sales enablement for the MSP. Before we get too far started, we want to let you know that we are recording today's episode. We will be sending that out with our follow-up notes along with the content from today's information. We are also taking questions throughout. We definitely want it to be interactive. So if you've got any thoughts, questions, just pop it into your GoToWebinar agent there and we'll address them either throughout or at the end, depending on where we can work it best. With that, Sam, if you could take us to the next slide. I'd like to welcome our host to every session, Tom Watson, former MSP owner in the IT channel. I think this year marks 20 years. Is that correct, Tom?
That's correct. Looking forward to this and having a good time here working with Scott and Robert and presenting some sales enablement.
Awesome. Speaking of Scott, we'd like to welcome Scott Kaplan. He's a familiar face to those of you who have joined us for these sales enablement editions in the past. Scott, thank you for joining us today. You're a practice director focusing on. How are you, sir?
Super.
Awesome. Well, and thank you, everyone, as well, who's on the line with us. And before we get too far into the ignition, I want to make sure that everyone understands that this is a byproduct of what we do here at eFolder Axient. What we really do is focus on data protection. You can see that we actually started with our backup product that's there listed on the bottom right portion. That was the eFolder solution that we started with almost 15 plus years ago. File level backup, kind of built for the MSP by MSPs, and really set the tone for where we've evolved over the years. We then moved into a solution around file sync and share called Anchor, and every time I say it, I just feel horrible calling it file sync and share because it is truly a productivity tool, a sync tool, and a security tool that gives your clients the ability to even manage some issues, even malware centric on their own accord while you're dealing with some of the bigger issues that they're hitting them. We've also moved into the cloud-to-cloud backup world with Cloud Finder. For those of you out there selling Office 365 and having trouble really making margin on it, we recommend that you think about this from an infinite amount of insurance as it relates to really helping your clients find files, objects that they may have lost within the suite of Office 365. We do email, contacts, calendar, and also SharePoint. So really a really great tool to help you manage and make a little bit more money on that suite. Moving over to the top right, you can see backup and disaster recovery there with Replicant and BRC, what is quickly becoming our flagship products, understanding the high nature of needs that MSPs need around backup and that system level perspective. Replicant we brought Replicant in a couple of years ago, chain-free solution, really bringing on-site recoveries and backup to a whole new level. I'm going to move the screen forward, if you would, please, Sam, to BRC. And focus this is our newest solution to our suite, and really one of the more dynamic, to be quite honest with you. As you can see here on the diagram, it can do many types of recoveries, all the way from the file and folder level, all the way across to systems, both physical and virtual. And I'll point your attention to that IT infrastructure and what we call full office virtualization. So if you have clients where minutes truly mean dollars and they have issues, what you can do is actually virtualize in the cloud within 15 minutes or so with BRC. Again, a wonderful continuity solution in the disaster recovery as a service model. So now that that's out of the way, we can focus on the real meat to have everyone here. And Tom, can you give us just a little bit of a perspective on MSP Ignition and what we're going to be doing with Scott here today?
Yes, well, I came on board in October of last year. I had actually been out of the MSP world for about 3 years. I had sold my business successfully. I had done my travel and everything else. And Matt Nacktrab and Adam Slutskin reached out to me and they asked if I wanted to come out here and start a program with them at eFolder Axient and teach people about my experience and help them build their businesses. So I've done that, produced a lot of content. Scott and I got together and decided we would do a sales enablement, which I think is great. A lot of this material is making its way into a book we plan to publish into this year. And I'm just excited to do this and give back to the community that has given me a lot and see what I can do for you. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Tom. And Scott, we'll turn the mic over to you and maybe bring us a little bit more overview about what we're going to be getting into over the next 45 minutes or so.
Sure, no problem. So, like Tom said, we do a lot of sales enablement on this MSP Ignition, and what we really want to do is arm each of you from an MSP perspective so that you can go out there and be successful in your day-to-day interactions and how you want to look about growing your business. So on the note today, what we want to talk about is really, like we said, the power of questions and understanding how you can really drive a lot more success through the power of those questions. And so when we sent out the email to get you to register, we kind of gave you some of these different types of questions to ponder. Have you ever found out you're talking to the wrong person, right? Or that you're not a right fit after you've invested a lot of different times, or you've wasted some of your time or your resources that you had you ask questions up front that you really could be a little bit more effective with. And so what we want to make sure that we go out there and do is give you some good tactics that can kind of help you avoid some of these different types of, nuances that you tend to deal with. And so there's a few things that we'll focus on today. And so if you could advance the next slide for me, Sam, please. So we want to talk about today is what we call kind of different phases of questions. And so what we're going to do is really break down different ways of thinking about how to go out there and leverage different style of questions to go after different types of focus points. What questions give you kind of historic or technical data? What questions help drive different customer commitments? What questions drive customer urgency? How do you leverage different questions to figure out the right way to move forward? And really go through the different motivations and drivers that not just the companies that you're dealing with have, but the people that you're speaking with and what they have. And then we'll give you a couple different secrets. The intent of every one of these MSP Ignition sales enablement trainings is so you or your teams that you have on this call or you follow up with after can go out there and do something differently, can do something more effectively, and really try to grow the business along those lines and grow your specific business in the manner that you want. So let's start off with a polling question. So like you guys know, we do a few different types of questions, and I'm going to explain each one of these so you guys can take a minute here and there. But the first polling question we want to ask you is, what questions do you ask clients when you're really seeking to drive new business and looking at those new business development opportunities? So do you tend to ask questions that are really kind of technical, data, historic, the questions like, what do you guys do for this? How do you do this? Where are you with this? Those different types of questions. Do you tend to ask more business impact style questions? So what would be the impact to your business? What would be the benefit that you would receive from, a process like this, or the benefit to this, this department or that department or this process or that procedure? Is it a personal motivation question? Now, how important is it to you? How would you rank? What's your prioritization? Do you tend to ask that? Or do you tend to ask questions that really just say, okay, what are you looking for? What do you look to get it in place? What's type of the budget that you have? And just kind of those questions of figure out how to frame it, where to make it plug in, and then go from there. So those are kind of quick high levels of it all.
Okay. And I'd just say we've had this, we'll be closing this. We've got it running for almost a minute and a half. We'll close it in just a second to give everyone else an opportunity to chime in. And just so you know, we've got about over half the people answering with the business impact questions coming through and rising to the top as far as what they're leading with.
Cool.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment though, real quick. So to comment real quick that that's what I would have chosen too. I think that's the most important thing, is recognizing and having an understanding of your potential client's business and focusing on that.
Yeah. So good. So what we'll do is we're going to hit each one of these, and it's really glad that you guys are talking about business impact. A lot of times I don't see that happen as much. And what I normally see, and I know Robert, maybe you saw them, and I tend to see people really avoid the personal questions. And
well,
so
Scott,
we'll talk a little bit.
you'll be. I don't know, maybe good to hear that our audience today is following suit there with 10% answering with the personal motivation questions.
Yep, not surprised. Not surprised. But we'll talk through it. And the intent here, and I've gone through these phases in some form of another with probably thousands of salespeople over the last 10 years plus. And what I have always tend to find is that type of coming into this session where people are more focused on one than the other. And the intent here is to make sure that you all leave with the ability to ask questions across the spectrums. You can see when and why you'd want to use the different types of questions as well. So let's talk about the first kind of phase one style questions that I call technical data historic style questions. And these are questions that I think everyone asks all the time. And they start something along the lines like you're seeing right here in these sub-bullets, right? So, what do you do for X, Y, and Z today? And whether it's, how they manage their business or anything that gives you just the data points of what they're trying to do or how they're trying to go out there and do it is what we're kind of referring to here. So it's the how do you do, what is your process, who's responsible for, how often, or even you start to say, what have been some of the problems? That gives you the historic side of the house, right? So what have been some of the problems? What have been some of the concerns, some of the frustrations? And as you, as an MSP, get more specific with the clients or the industries in which your clients are in, you're going to have much more specific style questions, right? And that starts to play to the value of how you want to position yourself, what are some of the nuances of how you create a solution, right? A la carte versus a fully managed solution or something in between, and kind of go from there with regards to as you're
Welcome to the webinar. Have entered as an attendee in listen-only mode.
So Scott, whatever that technical difficulty was, I think Sam has solved it for you. So you're good to move forward.
Solution. If you're ever demoing a solution, you're ever talking about something along the lines of an offer that you go out there and do, any questions that you really tend to ask by just human nature, they tend to be these types of technical data historic questions. Tom, you want to add your color on
it? Absolutely. So the way I look at this is I'm talking to someone and I think they may be a possible client for me. I want to know how they do certain functions in their business, both so I can qualify them or disqualify them right there. So I want to know things like, I like to get into things like, what is your process for backup? And who is responsible for those backup tapes or drives or whatever like that to do? How often does someone come in and audit your network and make sure your security is right? How often do you have on-site visits from your technicians? So now I can also ask questions where I'm getting a feel for what they're getting right now from a competitive situation. And also then I like to dig deep, especially I like this one you put in here, Scott. What have been some of the problems you have had with? So I'll usually have some kind of information from backups or talking about how often technicians come on site. I want to know specifics about what kind of problems they've had with a particular situation in their business. I want to have that pain point to work from. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah. So So what problems have you had with maybe malware attacks or user error of just losing files or whatever the case would be? There's so many of these different types of questions. Even your onboarding questions, like how many people do we need to go out there and support from a technical perspective? If we're talking about bring your own device or access to different servers or there's so many questions along these lines that are out there. So just making sure they give great fundamental kind of baseline items for you to go out there and try to get. So I'm sure there's a bunch that everyone has. which is good.
And Scott, I just point out there that it's good to have your own list of these questions you already have, but be flexible with them. And based on answers you get during that discussion you're having, punch those into these type of questions. And you get more information from it.
Yeah. And that was kind of what the ... would be able to kind of go out there and give us there too. So you can know how to ebb and flow with it. Cool. So the second phase of questions are what I call kind of the business impact style questions. And these questions really help drive the commitment from your customer to take action, right? And so what we really want to do is try to really focus in on. Now, you guys said that you ask a lot of these questions, which is great to hear. I don't know if I know it's a little hard on a web aspect, but if you guys even say, here's questions I'd like to add, and you want to put that in the chat, Robert can take a look at those and kind of go from there. But really, what are those business type of impact questions that you can go out there and have? And so we have a few that we brought up. And even with these, what we wanted to do is kind of show you where we use the different words. And so, when we talk about different types of questions, a lot of the times when I'm doing sales training, we really talk about pain and how to really understand the pain, the need, the problems that our customers are going through so we can really be a value add and really stress that. And so a lot of questions sometimes tend to be pain-based questions, which is the word like impact. But it doesn't mean they have to be a negative nilly or anything along the way. You might use what we call a gain style question as well, and that might be the word benefit. And I just use these words here so that you can easily connect with, hey, if I really want to get to a question that really helps drive commitment for them to take action, I need a word. I need a trigger for myself just to kind of go out there and try to think of it. And luckily, I've trained myself to think of the word impact and how does not having a certain type of environment, such a system, a process, how does it impact your business? How does it impact your team? How does it impact your profitability? How does it impact your ability to get more customers or whatever the it is? And so when I think of the impact that a system, a technical solution, a process buried within it can go out there and have on the business, the impact it can have on the person, or the impact it can have on a department, the impact it can have on their customer base, the impact it can have on their profitability, et cetera, et cetera. There are so many questions that can kind of come to mind, right? I threw a couple other ones in here too. What would be the benefit, to the department or the people or the process if? And so you can see just kind of the difference between the first question and the second question. How does not having X, Y, and Z impact your business or impact your people? Where what would be the benefit to the department if you did have? They kind of go to the same direction. It's just a matter of, do you want to ask it more from a pain focus or more from a gain focus? I will kind of tell you that there is some scientific proof out there that people are twice as likely to take action to avoid pain than to get a gain, believe it or not. And if the intent here of these kind of phase 2 questions is to really drive in commitment so they can take action, I personally tend to lead towards pain questions. But in fairness, I want to make sure that everyone has their own style that they can go out there and use, which is why I give the benefit style gain question as well. A couple other questions that are out there, impacts to your resources, profitability, tasks, when. So if you want to talk about, and one thing that we are hyper conscious from a backup and recovery perspective is what happens during disasters. And I think we all have friends and family that were impacted by hurricanes and everything else. And so some questions that I know we talk with a lot of MSPs about are what are the impacts to the functionality, to the way that they support their business when they're dealing with these disasters. And we're able to really think of the solutions that they're able to go out there and provide, or you guys are able to go out there and provide your end customers at MSP by having not just the ability to back up, but when a disaster occurs, it's really about the ability to recover quickly and spin up offices or as needed. And so we talk about these items a lot with MSPs that we speak to on a day-to-day level. And then the last little question, just a different flair for you, and then Tom, feel free to chime in here, is one impact is the right technology infrastructure, have on the business or the services or the employees or the onboarding. And I kind of spoke to the slide I said before of, how many people are you bringing on board? That's a technical data question. That's a phase one question. Well, then it's really easy to go into phase two. So, what's the impact if they're not set up correctly, or what's the impact to the business if you're not able to provide X, Y, and Z? And so, not that you have to start at one, then go to phase two, then phase three. You can start wherever, and you can ebb and flow. Well, I just want to show a tie here that when you ask a good, phase one question, and you get some good data or history, it can really lead into a good, solid business impact question. And so for those who said, yes, we do ask a lot of these types of questions, maybe think about, when do you ask those questions? Are they after they give you some information and then you kind of follow it up a little bit more? Do you ask it right from the beginning and then it leads you to kind of go back and find out the data and historic type of avenues? There's not a right or wrong. It's your personal preference. It's how you feel the conversation's going. So again, don't feel the need to go 1, 2, 3. Go however you need to. But Tom, how do you feel about business impact related questions that really kind of drive commitment to get the customer to take action?
Well, I'm going to give a little personal story here. So both of my parents are trial lawyers, and that heavily influenced me. And my mother worked at my MSP for years after retiring from law. How it influenced me in sales is they taught me, of course, ask questions you already know the answers to. And so one of the things I like to ask is, I know how important IT is to businesses out there. Anyone I'm talking to, I already know the importance. So I'll ask, how important is IT to running your business? I'm going to get something. I'm probably going to get a pain point out of it. I'm going to ask things like, what are the impacts if you can't get data back? I'm going to ask things like, how important is it to you that you get fast on-site service when you have a problem? I know the answers to these questions, but it gets people talking. It's a short question. It gets them to engage me and to tell me more about their pain. It's going to open up all kinds of discovery.
That's great, Tom. Thank you. Just a question and kind of blending, Scott, I think you did a nice job in blending, the phase one and phase two with this last bullet point. And Tom, I think you did even brought it in a little bit further when you talk about, how does IT impact your business? As it relates to the right technology infrastructure, is there a way that you might recommend to our audience to position this even a little bit more close to home for clients? Well, as it relates to just more than just infrastructure, something tangible within their business that you feel confident that they're going to be dealing with.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, Robert, because MSPs out there are often dealing with small clients. You might have 5 users, 20 users. That's often the sweet spot, about 20 users. The most beautiful thing about dealing in that range of businesses is they can move to new technology quicker than anyone else with the right direction. And so what happens is you're talking to companies like a big company of 1,000 people, it takes them forever to move to new technology. But a small business like that, you can go in there and you can ask them, what impact is the right technology? And you're up on your technology. You can say, because I know how to put that in place. I know how to solve a problem. But you can ask them about that, and they have the ability to engage you and make quick changes. And don't forget that. If you're playing in the MSP world, in that space, your clientele are clients that can pivot very quickly to new technology and incorporate that into your discovery questions. Make sure they understand that you can do that and ask them what kind of technology would give them increased capabilities in their business.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, and then you follow up. So what capabilities? Great, level 1. What benefit would that have to your business? Or how does not having that impact your business? Right? So again, how level 1 goes right into level 2. Awesome. So then the third phase of questions that we really wanted to go out there and talk about are the personal importance style questions, right? And this, where the phase 2 really talks about commitment, this phase really helps drive urgency, right? And trying to get them to take some sort of action on some type of timeline that you understand about, right? And hopefully if it's urgent, it's sooner rather than later, right? And so you can really kind of get an idea of what those are. And you just heard Tom give a great example of it. He said, how important is it to you, right? And so when I think about personal importance, that's probably why I put the quotes in at the top of the slide here, is to really kind of hone in on that word. Now, again, you can, whether it's importance, prioritization, on a scale of 1 to 10, and how would you rank? What would it mean to you? But if you look at what we're talking about and the words we're using here, you see those words like prioritization and importance and those things, but it also ties it to the person, right? Because the person that you're speaking to, you're trying to understand what is the level of urgency that they will take action on, right? So, how important is IT infrastructure to you? How important is having a good IT solution provider supporting your business important to you? Those are the key questions. And starting off there, so again, you don't have to go 1, 2, 3. You can start off there and then deep dive it however you want to go out there and try to deep dive it, and however you want to go out there and do it. But if you like to really set urgency and you want people on really focusing in on their need to make a change, it's really getting into their personal importance style questions, these phase 3 style questions. So Tom, I know you already kind of talked about how important is it to you. Is this where you tended to start, or was it just an example that came to the top of your head that you just went through?
This actually reminds me, I got to this point, I like to capitalize on things that my MSP did better than other ones. One thing we always did was we answered the phone. We had a human being answer the phone, not an automated attendant, between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. every day. Got me a ton of business. And what I would do here is I would things like, on a scale of 1 to 10, or how important is it to you that you know that you can call a phone number and get a hold of your IT people when you need them? I would ask things like, how important is it to you that you know that you can get someone on site within 3 hours of any problem you have? Some people might look at it as I'm selling a little too quickly, but these kind of questions resonate with people on a personal importance level.
Well, Tom, I think as well, why the way you're putting it, the key there is that going back to what you learned from your parents, always ask the questions that you know the answers to.
Yeah.
And you're going to be setting your clients and your prospects up with questions to answer whatever their answers are. You're going to have a pretty positive response in association with whatever their perspective is.
Another one I like to ask, these are getting into MSP best practices, but I would ask, how important is it to you that when you send an email to me, that you know you're going to get a response almost immediately? Because I had a practice in business where, and this is going a little aside, but if I saw a business-related email on my phone or my inbox on my computer, I made an effort to get some kind of reply out within 60 seconds.
Kudos to you, my
friend. And I will tell you things like this, but it goes back once again. I'm asking questions. I know the answers too, but they are questions. And when people hear the answers, they love them. They're all over them because it's a personal pain point. People out there have a hard time getting a hold of their IT people. They have a hard time getting service, a hard time getting people on the phone. I'm going right to those pain points, and I know they all have the same pain points.
And the key there is in kind of bringing it back, Scott, to the discovery, right? We're trying to discover clients issues, but we want them to be thinking about things that they might not be thinking of today.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess, yes, they could not be thinking about it today. Works just as well, even if they are thinking about it today. By you bringing it up and having a conversation, it takes out any ambiguity, right? And it really kind of stresses the idea, and them saying how important it is to them, right? You know what type of action they will or will not take, for you to know what actions you want to push or pull on. And that's, I think, the main gist of it here. Cool. So we talked about 3 different styles of questions, but in the polling question, we also asked about the ability to move forward. And, one thing that I try to make sure the multitude of salespeople across a multitude of different industries that I've worked on over the last 20 plus years, when we are asking questions, these, phase 1, 2, 3, the technical data historic, then the 2 of the business impact, and 3 of personal importance. Those are great when you're talking about specific types of products or solutions or services or capabilities. That's great. But then when you're trying to figure out how will we move forward to do business together, those questions are sometimes different. And so like some of the things we asked at the beginning, have you ever wasted time with people, or didn't get the business that you thought you were going to go out there and get? That's where these ability to move forward questions kind of come into play. And as you can see, there's a couple of different types of of items that you'll get on the topics side of the grid here, right? So if it's a time frame or a budget or competition or decision making, or even how they'll move forward, what might be the one or two different types of questions that are out there. And so you guys can see this, and you kind of got a sense from there with regards to how it's being broken down. And so we're not going to read through each one of these types of questions. I think you guys get the sense of what they are. But we want to make sure we can highlight that these questions are also very important. So in addition to your ability to understand the importance of being able to have an IT provider that will pick up the phone for you, that can be on site within 3 hours, then, what is involved with that for them to make a decision that they want to continue to go forward with? Or when would they want to do that migration from what they have today to move to you because of the solutions that you're providing? All of these different items definitely come into play. And so we wanted to make sure that we highlighted these questions, make sure that you're familiar with them, and that they're an important part of the kind of questioning process as you develop rapport and as you get things in alignment for your potential customers. Tom, anything kind of stand out to you more than the other?
My big thing is looking at competition. Those questions you were talking about right there, I like to, whenever I can, since I've engaged someone and I've gotten their pain points and I've let them know that I have answers to their pain points to some degree, like I just kind of put those little comments in there earlier we were talking about. I like to know, are they talking to other people? Sometimes you get a lot of people just kick the tires, and I like to right here weed them out. If I hear they're talking to 5 other companies, well, you know what? I'm probably not going to put in a bid. I want to know what they think is important in terms of vendors. I find out that they're really hooked on some kind of software that we've had bad experiences with. I'm not going to go with them because I don't want to inherit that problem. I like to ask a lot of questions about competition. I don't really care in particular the details of the contract and stuff like that they're getting, but I want to know who they're talking to, and I want to know what's important to them in terms of software packages and terms. And then I would say the other thing is asking them, you have multiple owners, the decision-making process. Like you said, what is your role in there? But I want to know if there's multiple people I'm going to have to get in front of. Ideally, of course, for MSPs out there, you really want those clients where there's a sole decision maker at the top, not a board. It's one person, and you can appeal to them and get a signed contract. That's the ones I focus in because I'm going to spend my energy on the ones where I have found out it's a better fit for me. And these questions you have here, Scott, are great ones to determine fit right at this level before moving forward anymore.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. Robert, just before we kind of go on too much, I don't know if there's been any feedback questions or examples that people have come in on the chat, but regarding phase 1, 2, 3 style questions or even ability to move forward. But if you guys haven't and you'd like to, please kind of start to throw those in now. We'll make that time.
I think that we did get one in from Phyllis, and she was wondering about communicating the ease of pivot and implementation. Tom, you had mentioned that, I think, when we were looking at the phase 2 questions, but as we think about the ability to move forward, I think those kind of blend together. So is there maybe to both of you in this regard to answer Phyllis's question, how can we kind of blend in a way of using these discovery questions to figure out and communicate at the same time to their prospect that this can be an easy process?
Well, that's an important part right there. A lot of IT companies roll in and they don't have a documented process. They're not using like Microsoft Project or the equivalent within ConnectWise. They don't have a formalized process. And I think this is the point where you say, yes, you do. And you know what? I used to send over to people a cleaned up version of a project plan I'd used before. I sent something similar to what we rolled out last year where we put 40 new PCs and 3 new servers in place. And it shows exactly how we did it. I kind of walk you through how that happened and how it worked out. And then I can also show them the end invoice and how the numbers worked with what we said. Give me additional points to sell to.
Okay. So I think then it kind of comes back down to, using the questions, maybe the technical side, maybe the phase 2 on the impact side, really understanding if they have a hesitancy in your discovery process to transition or to bring an MSP type business provider into their business. and then subsequently have those tools on the ready if they do show any reservations. So thank you, Tom.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is a lot of times you have to play to your strengths, and so you heard Tom talk about how how he plays to his strengths, and what he does is he uses questions to help get to the answers that play to the value add that he provides. And, definitely great ways to go out there and do that. And just be cognizant, if there is good value that you provide in the marketplace, you definitely want to ask questions about that to make sure that the customer understands that's a value. When you think about that in their decision-making process, to look for that type of value. So definitely make sure that you bring those up in some form or another. Excellent.
Thanks,
so now, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying thanks, Scott. That's all.
Oh, sorry. Thought there was a question with it. So the next thing about really kind of making discovery questions work. So what we want to go through with all of you is the idea of how do we make things more conversational and kind of go from there and those different pieces along the way. So how do you really make these kind of questions work? You already heard me say this a little bit, but really get to the pain. Really try to understand what's involved with it. How is it involved from that technical data historic level, the business and the personal side. So you definitely heard me go through that. And we gave you guys a good amount of examples there. The next thing is obviously making it, conversational. What we want you to go out there and do is be able to engage in these conversations and really kind of have the right type of dialogue with customers that will help you kind of go forward. So we talk about making it conversational. We kind of gave you guys a little bit of a script there too as an idea, right? So, Robert, the best way for me to understand your business is to ask you a lot of questions. So I really understand where you're at, kind of, how you got there, why you got there, and really where your business needs to go for the future. So you guys can feel free to kind of use those lead-ins as well, but it really sets the stage with regards to not just asking a bunch of questions, but why, and people understand that. And then when you ask questions, wait for answers. Sometimes we ask questions, especially if they're maybe more targeted or more specific questions, or if we don't get an answer, we feel, oh no, maybe I asked too harshly or I asked too much of a personal question. I would probably say let it fester a little bit, let it sit, but wait for the answers. And what you'll sometimes find is people are just thinking about it because you asked a good question. So don't feel the need to answer the questions, and even if you maybe have some of the answers in your mind, still let them speak to it, right? And you kind of go from there. Let them kind of voice their opinion. Now you might say something to the fact of, I talk with a lot of customers in this, industry and in this space, and what they tend to find is X, Y, and Z. And you could then, is that okay with you? Is that valid for you? And so you can go out there and ask some validation style questions, but you definitely want to make sure that you wait for answers for any questions that you're asking. Kind of along those lines, obviously tone is important. We say soft and approachable. That doesn't mean easy. It doesn't mean you're a pushover. It doesn't mean that. But it's the idea of just being approachable. It means you're being calm, cool, collective, and the intent of kind of being inquisitive. And hopefully you kind of heard that when I kind of gave that script of, it's approachable, right? It's being real clear in what we're trying to go out there and do. So I can go out there and be, guy who's going to ask you a bunch of questions, and there's a reason for it, because I care about where you're at, why you got there, and how you got there, and where you really want to go, and those different pieces along the way.
Hey, Scott, we've actually got a question come in that's from Hank, and Hank is wondering about the best format for discovery questions. Impromptu, specific meetings, phone versus face. Any thoughts around that? That may be a little bit more process specific, but as it relates to discovery questions, what's your thoughts?
No, I think that's a fantastic. And you said that was from Hank, is that right? So I think that the discovery questions happen throughout the entirety of your lifespan with customers. So I think as you continue to first find out, you're going to ask a lot of questions as you first kind of go through with that quote unquote dating stage, right? But then even as you get more rapport, you develop business relationship, even as they become a customer, you're still going to want to make sure we go back and validate different items, especially when you're talking about reasons why they made a change for you. So we talk about why they committed or why they did certain urgency with their actions. Hey, before, Hank, when we were talking about your business, some of the main things that were important to you were X, Y, and Z. Now that we're 6 months into doing business with each other, are we still in alignment? Has anything changed? Right? And what it helps you understand is those different types of items. So I'm constantly asking questions, and I'm constantly encouraging people to ask questions, and also continue to validate that those questions or those answers hasn't changed, right? And if so, open up that dialogue. So that's actually a great question. I probably should have brought it up earlier, so thank you, Hank, for doing that. A couple of little points there that we have for making discovery questions work is providing the value along the way. You heard Tom kind of speak to this. We're not just kind of doing question, but tying back to things that usually provide value. And so I think, you saw some great examples of how Tom did that. And lastly, we got one more bullet here in terms of kind of how you can make conversations go out there and work is, don't feel like you have to be that overly structured in the sense of I have to ask 3 level 1 or 3 phase 1, then go to phase 2, and then phase 3. But how do I go out there and just use this comfortably? Ideally, what we want to go out there and help all of you with is a way to make it fluid, right? And so you can feel free to bounce between all 3 phases of questions that are out there, or ability to move forward, however you want to go out there and try to drive that. So really kind of help be comfortable with it and kind of go from there. And so on that last note, I know one thing that we have put together for all of you as a kind of takeaway is a kind of a cheat sheet, if you will. So I think, Sam, you have a copy of that cheat sheet.
Before we get to that cheat sheet, I think Tom's got a couple of points on this specific slide before we go.
Yeah, I just wanted a couple of these things. One thing I really like, Scott, you have in there, phases are not in order, bouncing all 3 phases. I'd like to just remind everyone, this is a conversation. I will say, we have in here soft, approachable, inquisitive. I have a little more of aggressive style that works for me. And I come across, I think, pretty confident about the solutions I provide, and I put that in there. I want to talk to people that, have you had this problem? Because you won't have this problem with my company. We do this well. But what I do, I know I did well selling my MSP services out there. I know that I did well is I would be a little aggressive, a little bit confident on things, but then I would stop. I would ask the question. I would wait to hear their pain and their thoughts on it. And that's the big thing. I see so many salespeople out there just rushing through their pitch, or rushing through their questions, and not just listening. And the longer you listen, it will elicit more information that will allow you to come up with a better solution for these potential clients.
Thank you. Yeah, so along that lines, we have a little cheat sheet for you that we'll make sure is available for you. It kind of goes through the different phases of questions that are out there and kind of gives you the technical data historic types, the business impact types, and then the personal important types. And so we just wanted to arm you with something you can bring back to yourself or your team, something you could leverage on a call that you have coming up with a prospective client or a current client, just to keep the value and the relationship high, or to seek additional opportunities where you can provide additional services for your current clientele base, and kind of go from there. So just holding us to the commitment of making sure you guys get some good value add. No, you're good. You can go to the polling question. That's fine. So we have another polling question, and what we kind of want to ask all of you is, we heard the questions that you were asking before, but now that we've gone through the technical data historic, the business impact, the personal motivation, and then also the ability to move forward, which ones are you going to start asking a lot more of when you're seeking those new business opportunities? And again, new business might be growth within current clients and of new services and offerings you can give them, or just flat out new clients. So we'll give you guys a minute to chime in on that.
Yeah, and Scott, just while people are chiming in, you'll, I think I'm proud of the fact, but it looks like the vast majority, we're looking at 80% clicking all of the above.
Yeah, we kind of figured. Good. Fair enough. Yeah, I think we figured that was going to be the case. And when we were debating the polling question, and we said, should we throw in all the above? So I get that. But hopefully, I think what that tells me is that there were some additional items that you guys were able to get on this session, ways of thinking about it slightly different, of how you can go out and look across the board of these different nuanced questions, which is perfect. Anything else from a poll perspective, Robert?
No, I think it's just most of the people are going to be focusing on everything. So it looks like some of the other, I think the us as a whole, and I say us as people working in the IT channel, we were already focusing on the technical data historic. So I think we were pretty much in tune with that. No one's selecting that as a takeaway. It's more about bringing in, I think, the motivations, the ability to move things forward is where people are bringing their focus and hopefully moving their energies forward going forward.
Cool. Excellent. So we can close the poll. So the last little bit of, what we just want to make sure is for those who haven't been on all of these MSP ignitions, the ones that are specifically for sales enablement, this is just a way to put it all together. So we've started off with value propositions and elevator pitches, really talk about how we grow our MSP business across those 4 different sub-bullets of social selling, referrals, the events and promotions, how we qualify for more business. We did last month, and this month today we just did the power questions. And so if you start to see the progression, what we're really trying to do is arm you is how do you really go to market across the different types of ways you can grow your market, and then how can you go out there and really seek the opportunities that are of value for you, that are of importance to you, and how can you ask the questions where the customer you're going after sees you as a value add, unlike anybody else, and wants to give you their business. And if we've been able to help you guys grow your business over the last 3-4 months, or help your team get more effective with finding additional services and offerings with current clientele base, that's great. But please continue to give us feedback. We have more thoughts of what we want to bring you kind of the rest of this year. But we want to make sure we're providing value add for all of you. So I know we'll have some surveys that will go out and everything else, but this is kind of everything we've covered thus far. And if you've missed anything along the way, you have access to all of the materials that are there for you.
Yeah, Scott, thank you for leading into that. And I'll just reiterate that for those of you who this is your first or maybe second sales enablement side of the MSP Ignition program, we definitely encourage you to check out the other 3 that Scott was mentioning. Those are all accessible on the MSP Ignition resources page, which will be included in our follow-up email to you. So we encourage you to check those out, listen to the webinars, and just like we included today, which is available on the GoToWebinar download piece, that little cheat sheet, all of the other assets that were around building your value props, your elevator pitches, so forth and so on, are also available on the website. So please go check us out there, and we look forward to more engagement from you. But I think, Scott, we've covered most of the questions either through just the general conversation or as we've touched base on a few specific ones throughout. We don't have anything else outstanding. So, Tom, sure. Before we close out, do you have anything to finish this up on?
Well, I think we can kind of announce the next webinar we're going to do.
Okay.
We're going to do an MSP Ignition in, I guess, sometime in May, late May, and it's going to be about, I've got my costing calculator that I use at my MSP for years, pretty complex spreadsheet I built, can help you compute all of your costs, taking into account your services, all your vendors, the products you offer, and then giving you all kinds of information on profitability, cost per machine, per device, and it leads very well into how do you price out that MSA contract.
Thank you very much, Tom. Yes, and for those of you, so that is the other side of this MSP Ignition coin, focusing on MSP best practices. A lot of great tools from there, like the calculator that we'll be discussing next month. along with even service agreements and some other tools that we brought to the table. So definitely, again, check out the sales enablement side, but check out the entire MSP Ignition program. We think there's a lot of value there. And also keep an eye out for some of our other webinars that we're doing here with eFolder Accent. We have Joshua Foltz, our Corporate Chief Information Security Officer, focusing with us and WebRoot on a security program. So we'll have that coming in mid-May. And of course, we always do some additional other product solutions throughout. And my apologies for the stutter there, but we've gotten another question coming in from Daryl. And Daryl is wondering about getting signed into, I think it was a little bit more on the on our tech, more so than the content. So Daryl, we'll hear you and we'll get back to you.
We'll reach out to you outside of here.
Yep, absolutely. More about the platform that we're using. So apologies for everyone else. So Scott, any last thoughts from you, sir?
Nope, thank you. Wish everyone a great day. Make it a good one.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend, folks. See you next time.